So I'm going to roll right into our next speaker, I think. So our next speaker is a Director for Strategic Initiatives for the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development. So working in the public sector. And when I met her last night, I said, "Is that fun?" Because I assumed it wasn't, but she assured me it actually was fun. And I assume she's going to enlighten us a little bit on how that is fun. But she also mentioned another word in her session, which is not one that I would commonly associate, again, with government, but openness. So please give a warm welcome. Here to talk about The Future is Open, please welcome Tracy Peever.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy. Thank you for being here and thank you to the organizers as well. We're kind of switching up the A to B. We're going to live old school style. 140 characters, but not on your phone. You're actually going to meet a friend, or you can lean into the center of your table. And I want you to really think about what's going to go into your 140 characters. I want you to be really potent and powerful and knowledgeable with your language. Here's the question that I want you to get the essence of in just a tweet. So no questions, no dialogue about it. You're just listening and offering to your table. A lot of time down listening time. Here's the question. Think of a time when your environment deeply affected you, like that. The environment where you just had some kind of like powerful response. Think about that, compose your tweet, offer it to your table, and then we'll get started. So as you're kind of coming back to this environment and the environment that we're creating together for the next 2 days, I want to invite you to keep about 20% of your attention to the inside. Because we're really here for the impact that it's going to have on us. Make it personal. It's not just about what you're taking in from outside and what you're offering out. It's also like what we talked about this morning. What's really landing in the heart? How does it impact you? So before I begin, this is the environment that I've come from. I've come from Victoria, BC. Where's Shannon? On your list, put Hornby Island and Cortez Island. Last year I rode 5 Gulf Islands in 7 days on my motorcycle. Before I begin, I just want to express our gratitude for these traditional territories of the Huron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Seneca, the Ojibwe, and the Mississaugas of North Credit. We're so grateful that we can live, work, and gather peacefully on this land. Thank you. My name is Tracy. I met some of these folks a few years ago when I lived in Toronto briefly. I come from Montreal. I'm currently working as the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the BC Ministry of Children and Family Services, Family Development. My mandate is to change the system of care for children and youth aging out of care in BC. And 60% of those kids who can't live with their parents for whatever reason are First Nations kids. I come from 15 years of working in digital communications in Montreal, from like the inception of the internet until the birth of Facebook. And being at the center of a hub in that kind of environment where I was trying to connect different thinkers and technology and people and decision makers and money and clients, I was like, wait a second, like it was crazy making. We were trying to build this web in ladders and silos and hierarchies. It was crazy making, so I wanted to understand that. So I went and did a master's degree in human systems intervention at Concordia University. I'd like to give a shout out to my colleague, Marcella. She's also a graduate of the program, and please come and talk to her about socio-technical systems roundtable. So I did this master's degree, and my intention was to go back into the tech world in order to be some kind of change agent. We emerged with the theory of how human systems work, and a human system is like the macro system of like, you know, capitalism and the organizations we're embedded in, the teams that we work in, But we are also human systems in and of ourselves. We can choose to be a closed system or an open system. And I'm kind of on a time boundary. I usually give a wider talk of an hour and a half. So I'm not used to like talking to a room. I'm used to kind of facilitating participative process. So just bear with me. So where was I going with that? Human systems, intervention, want to go back into tech. Didn't really work out that way. The toolbox that I emerged with was a whole bunch of different tools for facilitating transformative dialogue. All change is dialogical. So the kind of container that we put ourselves in really matters. Every conversation matters that we have. So why should we care about open systems thinking? I encountered systems thinking and complexity thinking and open systems thinking in my master's degree, and it radically shifted how I move about in the world. It radically shifted for me what's important. So I'm a 20-year meditator and yoga practitioner. I taught yoga for many years, the Anusara tradition. And many spiritual practices can boil happiness down to these things. So when we connect parts, when we integrate, when we honor what's whole, we experience joy. And it's when we fragment and dissociate from each other or compartmentalize parts of ourselves, we suffer. Oh, and by the way, only 13% of people at work are engaged. These two things are related. The environment that we place ourselves in at work matters. So I worked in digital, startup culture, Birkenstocks, jeans, piercings, tattoos. I was in corporate for a little while in TD and Fido, but I was kind of always on the service provider side. I was on the fringes, on the edges a little bit. And then I became this HSI graduate, change agent, and somebody said to me, like, what do you do? And I was describing what I do. I facilitate transformative dialogue for change and purposeful meow, meow, meow. And he was like, oh, you're the lady in the frog suit who comes in. I was like, yeah, that's right. I felt like often I was in this frog suit talking about these concepts of like oneness, man. It wasn't quite like that. It just felt like that internally. So then I moved across the country and didn't want to build my business from scratch again because I was burnt out. I became a consultant at Railroads University, and then I got really lucky and I was hired with the BC government. And I recently started my new mandate. I'm really proud to work for the BC government. Open is actually a priority for the BC government in all these different ways. BC's new curriculum, it encourages teachers to be more facilitative, not so much the sage on the stage like I'm being today, but really facilitating dialogue and self-directed learning in students. There's a huge emphasis on working cross-ministry on wicked problems like the opioid crisis and homelessness. It's huge in BC. And what else? Homelessness, poverty, like big wicked problems. They're encouraging these cross-ministry initiatives. But they're meeting this learning edge of like, how do we do that? We need kind of tools to figure out how to work multidisciplined. In like practical terms, each conversation matters, right? So how do we actually do that? So what I'm gonna offer you today, I'm kind of offering you a polarity. I'm being kind of quick and going over the surface of things, and open systems thinking is actually quite deep and mind-blowing. I'd like to honor the lineage of this thinking of Fred Emery and his partner Marilyn Emery. Fred has now passed, and Marcella and I were very lucky that we got to study with one of the foremost North American thinkers in open systems thinking. His name is Don Daguerre, and he was the dean of our program at Concordia. My voice is shaking because I'm nervous, by the way. Thank you. So that's kind of part, thank you so much. That's kind of part of being an open system, right? Is to show up and go, holy shit, I'm nervous. So honoring the lineage, Don Daguerre, he's retired now, but you can find writings. I have a resource slide at the end, and you can always come and talk to me about where to find this stuff. This is from Margaret Wheatley. This might look familiar to some of you. If it's familiar, please twinkle. Thank you. So I'm offering you a polarity today. I'm simplifying because I'm time-bound. What I see is the dominant system, which is hierarchy, bureaucracy. It's peaking and it's starting to decline. And there's another way that's emerging, and we see it in agile teams and folks who are practicing Scrum. We see it with employee-owned organizations and holacracy. It's coming on the rise. That's the green arrow that's rising up. There's a bunch of people in frog suits and wingnuts like me who were frustrated with the dominant system, and we dropped out. We just dropped out. I went and became a yoga teacher for a while, and then I went back into corporate. And then I dropped out again, and then I went back. But then I started meeting other ladies in frog suits like Marcella. And we're meeting each other here today. We become the new system because we become allies of each other and we build it together. And as this new way of being comes up, as it's arising, the dominant system goes, holy shit, what are we gonna do? We try to squish them. But it's not going to work. Here's the polarity that I want to offer you with respect to open systems thinking. I'm going to talk about design principles. So how we've placed ourselves in organizations, how we've designed our organizations, and think like hospitals, schools, government, startups. We're conscious about how we create those organizations. We designed the systems that we're in. Humans designed these systems that we're trying to thrive in. There's two ways of thinking about how we design ourselves for productive human activity. DP1, or Design Principle 1, might look familiar to you. It's in a pyramid, it's in a hierarchy. People are represented by boxes, and there's very clear lines of communication, power, and influence. This other way that we see thriving in agile teams is what I'll call DB2, or an open system, or a self-governed system, self-managed system, holacracy, participative democracy. There's many different names that we can call it. Was there someone in the back who wanted to say something?
I just was going to say that sometimes you step in front of the projector.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Open system, learning. So you'll see that DP2 has dotted lines around it. That means that information can flow very freely in and out of the system. I'm going to give you another binary just for simplicity. There's two essential things that any successful organization or team needs to be able to do in order to survive. Two things. The first is being able to learn from the environment. So an organization is embedded in some kind of environment, in some kind of industry, in some kind of way that the organization wants to serve or offer a product. We exist as an organization in order to somehow change the environment that we're embedded in. So that's the first thing a successful organization needs to do. Learn what's needed from the environment. The second thing that an organization needs to be able to do is to be able to plan to act in that environment. Create a product that will serve. Create a service that will somehow serve and change the environment. The environment around an organization, it presents opportunities. I did it again, right? The environment presents opportunities and challenges all the time. It's changing all the time that organizations need to be able to respond to and adapt. There's a history to DP1. When we moved from farms into factories and we set ourselves up to create products, the people at the top actually made decisions about how far apart people needed to be so they couldn't talk to each other, so they could reduce waste, increase productivity, increase profit. And there were people doing one thing all day, every day. And if that person burnt out, they just replace the person. It's just a box. Just fill it. It comes from, like, the organizations we work in today come from this root of mechanism. thinking about people as parts, replaceable parts. The beliefs from Mechanism about people, the belief is that people are unethical and stupid and lazy and they need to be managed by other smarter people at the top. This creates unhealthy power imbalances, and that's how trade unions came to be about. Like, we need to protect ourselves. So some principles about closed systems or DP1 systems. It's designed to be inherently competitive. There's fewer spots at the top than there are at the bottom. You're paid more at the top than you are at the bottom. It's a parent-child relationship model where decisions are being made at the top, action is carried out at the bottom, and if you're at the bottom, you gotta ask permission to make any kind of change. The assumptions are that people are replaceable, people are unethical, they need to be managed by other people, and it's a risk-averse system. In a hierarchy, mistakes, cover them up, don't talk about them, don't show that we have any kind of vulnerability. And in that kind of environment, it produces effects, and one of the key effects is that we don't learn about how to do things better. So it breeds what Chris Argyris has called organizational defense mechanisms. Twinkle if you know about Chris Argyris. Great. If you don't know about Chris Argyris, here's a little primer. He came up with this expression, skilled incompetence. I think that's hilarious. Skilled incompetence means that we actually get better at being incompetent, at covering up our mistakes and not learning from them. We get very skilled at defending ourselves in this competitive DP1 hierarchical system. Maximize winning, minimize losing. If there's conflict or discomfort, don't talk about it. And the things that we don't talk about, we don't even talk about the fact that we can't talk about those things. I mean, the elephants in the room are so huge, right? I see nodding, like, yeah. So Chris Argyris. Oh yeah, and in a hierarchical system, I mean, how easy is it to tell your boss, you know what, I think you're way off base here. How easy is it to tell your boss when your boss is making decisions about your performance review, if you're gonna get a raise, if you can take that vacation, what your next project file is gonna be? Sorry?
If you're going to stay.
If you're gonna stay. So here's what Don Daguerre, our mentor and prof, has called the spiraling maladaptive effects of bureaucracy. And it is kind of a downward spiral. So from these defense mechanisms like gossiping about those other folks and the cliques that we create and passing the buck about whose fault it was, it creates this kind of cultural, emotional tone of like contempt, resentment, anger, shame, embarrassment. Productivity goes down because people are afraid of each other. People, you know, call in on the long-term disability. Goes into like anxiety, to this kind of widespread irresponsibility because no one's holding the bag. Everyone's kind of passing the accountability and responsibility to the person at the top. And by the way, our culture is the most highly addicted cohort in human history. There's a relationship between the environments that we're placing ourselves in and what we've designed for ourselves and how healthy we are. Some examples of bureaucracy, I mean, there's many, many more. The RCMP, the space shuttle disaster, Kodak, digital cameras were coming. Kodak was like, nope, we're gonna defend ourselves against that. We don't wanna change. They don't exist anymore. The good news is that human values shift over time, and there is a shift happening. There is this green loop that's coming up. We're starting to value equity and equality over dominance. We're starting to value much more transparency over closed information and privilege. We are inviting more and more power with structures as opposed to power over. We value team members who can bring multiple skills from multiple different diverse environments. We're starting to value those people in the frog suits who can help us think differently. And we're starting to value and reward a whole team's whole task as opposed to individual rewards. We are moving towards a world of cooperation and partnership. I need to believe that. And so I look for ways that that's happening, and this room is one of them. So here's some salient points about what an open system actually is. It values cooperation by design. So it assumes that people are purposeful. We talked about our purpose in this room. We all have some kind of purpose that we're working towards. It assumes by default that people are purposeful and that they are capable of learning. And so decision about what we do and the action that's carried out is co-located in the same person, the same team. So we're deciding and acting together as opposed to decision and action being separated. Those who do the work are also deciding about the work. And it's designed for adapting with the environment. So by design, we learn deeply about what's going on in our environment. We're encouraged to be outside the boundary of our organizations, learning and bringing new information in so that we can do something about it. And by the way, this way of organizing is not that new. Fred Emery started talking about this stuff in the 60s, 70s, the 80s. You can read his writings. But it actually aligns very well with traditional ways of knowing and deciding. So an open system is optimized to be in close contact with its environment through permeable boundaries. So allow information to move through the whole system. Don't concentrate it and privilege it. An open system allows information and learning to move through the whole system. Any kind of repair or restoration or problem, an open system invites the system to self-organize around repairing that problem and restoring the system. It's not in the hands of one person at the top. It belongs to all of us. We share the problem. So, has anyone heard of LRN out of New York? Twinkle if you know LRN. Please download the How report. They've put out 2 How reports now, and they've measured 3 governance models. Self-governance, or DP2, is in red. And what it shows is that between 2012 and 2016, it more than doubled. Self-governance in organizations, and they measured 16,000 employees in 17 countries. Self-organization is on the rise, and we better be ready, and we better know how to embody that. In self-organizing environments, they were 92% more likely to report misconduct. They were 96% more likely to be engaged in innovation. And they were 95% more likely to be loyal. So this is a free downloadable. Go and check out these 3 different governance models. They call DP1 blind obedience. And informed acquiescence is like nice and gentle hierarchy in DP1. We'll ask you what you think, but we're still going to decide. Okay. I'm running out of time, but I'd like to offer you just a little measurement because this is all about you. This is about how you are coming to your work. So please have a piece of paper and a pen. You're going to do just a little bit of drawing. You're going to be making 6 of these kind of XY axes. You're going to be kind of plotting on 6 kind of little graphs. So open systems thinking is not just a way of thinking, it's also a researched, proven change process. So when an organization wants to move from a formal bureaucratic DP1 hierarchical system to a formal and legal self-managed organization, like they talk to their lawyers and everything, there's actually a change process that open systems thinking puts forward. It's a 5-day process. I'm not going to be talking about that in my talk. Invite me back next year and I might, or invite Marcella because she's here in Toronto. So as part of the change process with open systems thinking to move to a DP2, this kind of gives you an idea of what we value. So as part of the change process, employees are asked to kind of rank where they are with their current role and where they want to be with their next role. The first thing they rank is they think about the elbow room that they have. So I want to invite you to think about your role, your job, even if you're self-employed. Think about how much elbow room and autonomy you have in your decision making. And then 0's in the middle, +5's on one side, -5 is on the other. -5 is like, I don't have any autonomy. And +5 is like, I have way too much. So rank where you are on that scale of too much or too little. Elbow room, autonomy and decision making. Similar scale. 0 is in the middle, -5 is not enough, +5 is way too much. How much learning do you get to do on the job? And by learning, I mean, can you self-set your own goals? I may be a product manager, but am I allowed to go and learn graphic design? Can I make that kind of decision, or does it have to fit within my job description? How much can you set your own goals in your job? And the second part is, how much feedback are you actually getting? On the third scale, 0 is optimal, -5, +5. Think about the variety of what you do in your job. Are you really spread thin, just like a diffuser? You're kind of the Girl Friday doing everything? Or are you doing one thing all day long, just like those people on the assembly line? How much variety do you have? Put it on that scale, -5, +5. I'm running a little bit over. I'm getting laser eyes, so I'm going to wrap up as soon as I can. So there's 3 of the 6 factors. It's kind of interesting, you know? Take a look at those things. Like, if you needed to move the needle, how would you move it? We want optimal. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want optimal for us. What can we handle? This gives you an idea of what we value in an open system organization. 3 more scales. This time it's 0 to 10. So 0 is very little, 10 is like max. Think about how much mutual support and respect you have in your workplace from all the people, bosses, all the way up the chain, your colleagues. How much do you actually have? Put it on that scale of 1 to 10. The next scale is meaningfulness. We want our work to have some kind of value. So there's 2 parts to that. One is that the work that I do is socially useful. It's meaningful to the kind of world that I want to live in. And the second part of that is the work that I do I see how it fits into the whole? If I'm working in a big bureaucratic environment, do I know how these reports that I'm generating actually help the whole? So rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. From 0 to 10. A little bit, a lot. And then the third scale is, does the work that I do contribute to the kind of future that I want? How does it contribute to a desirable future for myself? If I'm making minimum wage, is that really getting me to where I want to go in life? Is that going to get me to Spain? Is that going to get me to Hornby Island? Is that going to get me a motorcycle? So that's just a really quick overview of the 6 factors that we take a look at in an open system. You can take that home and reflect on that for yourself. And maybe in these scales, you'll see a way that you can move the needle for yourself. So on these 3 scales of 0 to 10, we want to max out. We absolutely want as much mutual support and respect as we can muster. And meaningfulness, desirable future. I was going to talk about the 2-stage model that Open Systems puts forward about how to formally and legally change from a hierarchy to an open system, but I can't go there today. Here's some resources that you can come see me about after, or you can Google. Oh, sorry. Photos are being taken, so I won't click it over. Sorry this wasn't more participative, but with more time, or maybe somewhere else, can go a little bit deeper. And that's how you can find me on Twitter. That's my Honda Shadow, and that's where I live. I'm from Victoria, BC. My name's Tracy Peever. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Keep it going for Tracy. All right, so we are going to take a very quick break, like a 5-minute break. like 5 minutes, and then I'm sending Jeff after you. That's how short this break's going to be. And I have been assured that that lunch is a thing, although I questioned it before, around 12:30ish. I'm still not 100% convinced, but I'm buying in so far. So quick 5 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll resume.
Thank you. Thank you.